until some other time we come up with
So-
pilot program language to incorporate, or the language changes from the legislature, we can always revisit.
Do we have to make a motion to explore the pilot program?
And we had
That
consensus.
includes, yeah, consensus, we're gonna
Consensus,
pilot,
okay.
yes.
I mean, this could all be moot in a matter of months.
Yes. That's why I'm thinking of resources, how much resource do we
Oh.
wanna put behind this if we could get some correction pretty quickly through the implementation language?
The the woman I mentioned from Green Source, who was, over the dispensaries, she said she will actually come to our city and speak to us. So we have a resource to craft a pilot program if we need one, and really do it properly, so that we have this available to us. It's there.
I'm sorry. I'm chuckling because if I was good at math, I'd probably be a doctor. I want to make sure that a three-quarters vote is greater than 2/3. Somebody.
Well, I did the math, okay, and it is.
0.75.
But, my question is, excuse me, whether or not the 2/3 vote required is 2/3 of the legislative body, or is it 2/3 of the quorum?
It's 2/3 of the quorum.
Okay, thank you. Just wanna make sure.
Okay. Let's get through, we're gonna take a break here in a little bit. Let's get through the consent agenda, and then we'll take a break. Okay, consent agenda, we'll take citizens' comments first. Is there anything anybody would like to pull from the consent agenda? Yes.
I would like to pull E1, History Market
E1,
sign
History
request.
Park Market sign requests.
Yes.
Okay, so E1 is gonna be pulled and stand on its own. Anybody else? Okay, so citizens' comments on the consent agenda, which includes the minutes of the regular meetings for July in a legal invoice, disaster recovery contractors, debris monitoring, utility material agreements, resolution for Chenep, and the police department has 2 MOUs. If anybody would like to speak on any one of those items, consent agenda items, including the History Park sign request, anything from the consent agenda, now would be the time. Please come to this podium. You have 3 minutes. Anybody like to speak on consent? Okay, seeing none, we will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda without E1.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion, a second, to approve the consent without E1. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried unanimously. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Lisa Hannon, interim zoning official for the record. The History Park market is under new management, and they have requested additional signs. In 2010, they requested 6 off-premise directional signs. Now they are requesting 12, along with a banner on site. The name's going to be changed to Open Air Market. As a comparison, the downtown farmers market is allowed 8 off-premise directional signs, and they have 2 on-site signs. And special events, when they are approved for off-premise directional signs, they are allowed a maximum of 8. Staff is recommending approval of the maximum 8 signs.
And these locations are, it's just not a map, really. Highway 41, West Marion. Oh, okay, let's see that.
Madam Mayor?
This is the map they provided staff for the locations. Council had originally approved a map for events that are in the Shreve Street area. Which is before you, which when we have events like at the Good Shepherd Church, in the History Park area, this is where they are allowed to put their off-premise directional signs.
And then where is this banner going?
The banner would be on site at the
On
History Park.
Park
Yes.
property?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, the reason why I asked to have this pulled is because when I read this and looked at this and looked at what they were asking, and certainly understand the downtown market and its geography and where it is, it doesn't need as many signs. This one is in an area that needs more attention, and I really felt I could understand why they're requesting 12. And so I really felt like I didn't have a problem with the 12. It's not that I'm trying to, go against what staff is saying, it's just I could understand the logic, and so I really felt that I wanted to support it. So, that's why I asked to have it pulled.
Okay. Any other comments? I mean, to me, we already have this plan. To be consistent would make a lot of sense. But it's your pleasure, whoever would like to make a motion.
I don't see that we need 12 signs. I mean, I think to be consistent for both markets, I think it makes sense to keep it at 8 and follow staff's recommendation. And I'd make a motion to that effect.
Second.
We have a motion, a second, to approve the staff recommended signage. Does that include the banner?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay, so we have a motion, a second, to include the staff recommendation of 8 signs and the banner. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Carried, 3-1. Okay, we finished we did all the consent. We're going to take a break. It is 10:54, so we'll take a 11-minute break. 11:05, we will be back. Hi, we are back in session, and now we are on the regular agenda. So we will be taking citizens' comments on regular agenda items only, which would be an interlocal agreement for the distribution of the 5-cent local option gas tax with the county, the city request regarding the upcoming state legislative agenda, the Pickleplex of Punta Gorda, the FDOT Community Aesthetic Features application for the new mural under the 41 Bridge, and that's basically it on the regular agenda. So if you would like to speak on any of those topics, now would be the time. Please take the podium over here, state your name, and you have 3 minutes. Regular agenda items. No? Regular agenda items, you want to speak now, or
He's gonna present,
he's gonna have, okay, he has a presentation, all right,
yeah, at the agenda item.
okay. All right, so now we'll move into budget, resolution,
Yes, this is a resolution which I'll read by title only. A resolution of the City Council of the City of Punta Gorda, Florida, approving the interlocal agreement between Charlotte County and the City of Punta Gorda for distribution of 5-cent local option gas tax revenues, authorizing the mayor to execute the interlocal agreement and providing an effective date.
The distribution formula is the same as has been existing over the years. There are no changes. We will be reviewing this every couple of years. And staff is recommending approval. We met with the county staff as well. They are also recommending we approve the same formula. There are 2 alternatives on the formula. For the 5-cent gas tax, you can go by the 5-year transportation expenses per the city and the county. There's another option out there. You can go by population. It's under the purview of the county, so we can negotiate with them. If you looked at one option, we would be getting less money. If you looked at another option, we would be getting more money, but that can change over time. So we've kept the middle option, which has been in existence for a number of years now, and we feel it benefits the city. So we're recommending approval of the same formula.
any comments for Howard?
No.
And as long as as they're not trying to take something away at this point, I think I'm good.
Yeah, recommend approval of this resolution.
Second.
We have a motion, a second to approve the resolution. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried unanimously. Okay, no unfinished business. Now we have new business, and the first is the wizard will come to the podium, and we will discuss our request regarding the upcoming 17-18 state legislative agenda.
As our lobbyist, Jerry Paul, gets set up, we have 4 items that have come to our attention so far. The first one is fairly obvious, home rule for medical marijuana. The next 2 items we've been doing over the last number of years, supporting the Charlotte County requests and supporting the League of Cities legislative agenda request. We've been doing that for a number of years. And the fourth one, we are applying for a grant for the Boca Grande area stormwater improvements. We might want to ask our lobbyist if this is the year now that we may want to also ask for a state appropriation in addition to possibly the grant. We don't know if we're going to get the grant or not. We haven't done one in a while, since that one year when we got the RO plant and the Vietnam Wall. And we've held off for a while, because that was a lot for a little town like ours. So those are the 4 items that come to our attention. I'm sure our lobbyists can discuss what's going on up there.
Great, Mayor, council members, Howard, I appreciate the opportunity to come by. We've talked a little bit via email about the upcoming legislative agenda and the schedule and timing for that. So why don't I try to break this down into just logistics and timing, what we can expect in terms of the framework of the impending session cycle, and then maybe we'll go into some of these priorities. And we have a little bit of time between now and the legislative delegation hearing for Charlotte County, which is going to be October 19th. But so first of all, the timing. Obviously the Constitution says that the legislature has to meet every year, at least for a minimum of 60 days to pass a budget. It's actually the only thing that they're required to do is pass a budget, at least constitutionally required to do. It actually specifies when that 60-day period is for every other year. And for this coming legislative cycle, it's not one of those years where it specifies the when, and so the legislature tends to meet earlier during that off year. So it's a whole bunch of words to say that the 60-day legislative session this year, unlike the others, will begin on January 5th and it will end on March 9th. Normally it's a couple months after that. But what that does is back everything up out the earlier part of the calendar so that we have the committee weeks, the pre-session period of time when the committees start meeting, they start looking at what their actual agenda will be. They actually start hearing bills, and a fair number of the bills that are filed will make it through or fail to make it through those committees even before the 60-day legislative session. So this year, because we're on an accelerated cycle, the legislative committee meetings are starting in September. We'll have 1 in September, 2 in October, 2 in November, 2 in December. So things are picking up fairly quickly. In tandem with that, every legislative delegation, every group of legislators who have some portion of their district, either House or Senate, that touches a particular county, belongs to that delegation. Some legislators belong to multiple, maybe 6 or 8, 4 or 5 delegations, and in less populated areas, a member of the House or Senate may only belong to a couple of delegations. The Charlotte County delegation has 3 members, 2 senators, 1 House member. Senator Greg Stubbe, Senator Denise Grimsley, and our delegation chair, Representative Mike Grant. And so the 3 of them will meet on October 19th at the Punta Gorda Isles Civic Association Center, which is the location we've done it for the last several years, and basically hear from the community, all local governments and individuals who come forward and say, hey, here's what we would like you to focus on this session. So between now and then, we as a council need to finalize this list. The four that City Manager Koenig listed is a good start. But we have a little bit of time, and for those who have not been to one of those delegation hearings, we stand before the podium and we simply lay out what our priorities are. Sometimes there are policy issues like the medical marijuana issue, the preemption issue, and sometimes they are appropriations issues. In the past, we've sought appropriated funds through the General Appropriations Act, through the legislative branch, for things like the RO project, and other issues. So this year, the Boca Grande grant, perhaps Howard, you and I can meet offline. Let me do some analysis of how far along we are with that grant and see if we could do an appropriation in tandem with it. Typically, when you do an appropriation, you need a sponsor on the House side, a sponsor on the Senate side. So we would want to speak with those legislators commonly from our delegation and get them to sponsor, and then gain support from key legislators that are maybe not necessarily directly connected to our delegation, but are key to the appropriations process for that type of funding. So for the Boca Grande Drainage project, you know, that would be the Agriculture and Water Appropriations Subcommittee, and on the House and the Senate, and we can talk through that. We can have some offline discussions with them and see what the gravity of it is. Maybe we pursue a legislative appropriation that is a portion of the grant amount, or maybe we do one and then shift over to the other. There's times, for example, when an agency would prefer to fund something through a grant than to have to budget it through the General Appropriations Act, and so you get a certain distance down the path with the appropriation, and they go ahead and release the funds through the grant. So we can talk about some of those strategies offline and then come up with a plan for that. Before we go into the specific topics, are there any questions about the logistics, the calendar, the framework, the timeline heading towards this legislative cycle? Well, let's jump right into the topics. I think that the preemption issues as a category are going to be big this session. They were big last session in the sense that there were a host of areas where the legislature, in crafting different laws, created a conflict with home rule in the eyes of local governments, cities and counties. And although that has been happening for as long as there's been a legislature, it seemed to take on a life of its own this last session, more so than I've ever seen. And the local governments have pushed back more so than I've ever seen. You saw that at the League of Cities conference. I'm seeing it at the Constitutional Revision Commission hearings that we attend. And so I think that a growing amount of energy is being put behind that issue, and I suspect there will be far less preemption this coming session. Second issue in that context is, will there be any rollback of that? I suspect there will not be much rollback. In other words, modification or walking back some of the preemption from last session, with one exception. It is quite possible that the extent to which local governments like us combine our resources and our energy and our messaging and our political capital on the medical marijuana issue, it is quite possible that there is a glitch bill that would provide a higher degree of autonomy on those locations. Now, I think there's going to be a limit to how far that can go. Some of the topics that we've heard discussed, like conflicts with ADA, federal labor laws, those sorts of things. Quite frankly, some of those conflicts are inherent to the language that the Supreme Court allowed to be in the constitutional amendment itself, and a legislature can't change that. I mean, a legislature could pass a bill saying that the speed limit on I-75 is going to be 100 miles an hour. Doesn't mean that it is. And so there's some things that are frustrating about this that I don't think the legislature can fix. But as to trying to mete out a compromise on autonomy at the local level for where these dispensaries are, I think they do have more flexibility. And I think that if we stick together and we speak with a clear voice, and to the extent that you authorize us to combine resources with a consensus position with the League of Cities and perhaps a few of our key allies, that we can maybe get some relief there. As we get further down the path, and I've been speaking with Scott Dudley on this at the League of Cities, as we get further down the path about coming up with specific language for a remedy, obviously I'll pass that through Howard and ask for your authorization to support some specific language, easing that and giving some more autonomy. As you may know, I know that your counsel, Mr. Levin, knows from reading the statute, they did actually have language that's in the statute that prohibits these dispensaries within 500 feet of a public school.
Yes.
Clearly, there's a recognition by the legislature that the location matters, you know, on the micro level. I think we just need to get them to recognize that working that out community to community is best done by the leaders of that community. And I think we can make that case. But it's gonna take a unified approach, a lot of communities getting together and pushing in the same direction. I saw that Brevard County, I think just yesterday, like many cities, struggled with this, just like you have. And it seems like a very large percentage, I don't have the numbers yet, I've been asking Scott Dudley for that, but a very large percentage of the communities came down on it just the way that you did, and felt like they were boxed in. You are boxed in. And although, if I could restate it, you want to comply with the will of the 70%. You don't want to ban this, but that's the only option that you were given. You know, in the absence of some level of authority to craft something that works for our community. Even Brevard County and a lot of the municipalities on the lower East Coast where this constitutional provision passed at an even far greater rate than the 70%. Clearly those communities are not wanting to obstruct or interfere with the people's right to access this. But even those communities felt as though they had no choice but to put in place a moratorium, at least for a period of time. I've heard a fair amount of discussion about concepts like the pilot program, although I don't know that I've heard anybody speak about it with quite as much thought behind it as David did. But Brevard County, for example, agreed to adopt the moratorium, but have a period of time when they try to come up with a new zoning classification that is pharmacy and dispensary, something that fits within the structure of the law here. Presumably they would have to grandfather existing facilities, so they wouldn't be ripping out pharmacies that are currently in place. But then going forward, they would have a zoning classification, and as your attorney said, they would structure it in a way so that they're not discriminating between the two. I think there is going to be a host of communities that try to do that, and so there may be some opportunity to collaborate with them and try to come up with some model version that maybe we could consider as well. But like Councilwoman Prafke said, this may become moot by March, so we'll see. I think we should probably take a two-pronged approach. Prepare ourselves for a pilot, while at the same time put political capital and advocacy efforts into opening this up a little bit more. And post-session, it may be that the work that you have done on a pilot is still usable, but might have to be modified slightly. Any questions on that topic before we go forward? Another area where I expect there will be a fair amount of activity again in the preemption category is the vacation rentals. But I suspect there will not ultimately be a bill. I don't know for sure. I mean, there's no way you can predict that, but I don't feel that having as much energy as the medical marijuana preemption issue, but it's up there. In an election cycle, and remember, this is the last legislative session before another election. It's possible that something gets passed in that area again, but you know, the legislature has gone through a very heated debate over that 2 different times, once in 2011 and once in 2014, and it was very contentious, and a lot of the municipalities and counties put a lot of their resources into that, and I'm not sure the legislature or the league is going to make that their #1 priority, but we'll see. What else? I haven't seen a list yet of Charlotte County's priorities. I suspect that I'll see that before the delegation hearing, but if Mr. Koenig sees that sooner than me, perhaps pass that along. And, you know, we have for the last few years supported their agenda, but we should probably look at the specific items. With that, any questions?
No, but I just want to tell you that, I don't know if you're aware, but for this last session of the legislative committees of the Florida League, we were directed by President Gil Ziffer to support a super priority. So every committee supported the super priority, which has to do with home rule. And that's going to be a major, major focus of the league. And then the committees, we only pushed up one other priority besides the super priority. So it seems like President Ziffer is definitely taking the league in that direction on many fronts, and that's will be a major focus. And I'm on the utilities, they changed the name. I'm on the utilities committee, which used to be energy, environment, and natural resources. And so we pushed forward water infrastructure funding of all types, septic to sewer, stormwater. So that was our priority, but I'm pretty sure they'll get this published. It was just, you know, approved last weekend, so I'm sure it's somewhere on their website. But another big question mark is the CRA issue.
That's on my list. That is
Okay.
another one. So, do you want me to give a little bit of background on that? So, I think after the CRA workshop earlier today, or the CRA hearing, everybody in this room is familiar with what a CRA is. They tend to not be controversial in our area because our CRAs have been fairly well managed and they have accomplished their goal. They've been effective, and there hasn't really been any controversy over the character or quality of their management. But in other parts of the state, there is some alternative data on that point. There's been audits that have focused on specific CRAs that maybe have not received the level of oversight that they should have, either internally or externally. There have been reports of some members and some stakeholders exploiting the power of a CRA to divert tax dollars through tax increment financing to support certain pet projects that maybe are not within the scope of the original CRA. The simple truth is that, you know, the old adage that one bad apple spoils the whole barrel, right? So there have been a few CRAs that have earned a fair amount of negative attention, and that has caught the attention of some key members of the legislature, and they reacted this last session by filing legislation and pushing pretty hard on it to, in effect, move towards eliminating the whole CRA concept. Now, if you read the legislation, it didn't actually shut down existing CRAs. It would have prevented the creation of new ones. It would have required a higher level of oversight and financial accounting and auditing. But then some of the amendments filed would actually then have a period that looks at existing CRAs and put in place a mechanism to start sunsetting those. I don't know that first of all, that legislation became quite controversial because there are a lot of CRAs, particularly in more urban areas where they're trying to redevelop blighted portions of communities. And so a lot of local governments have depended upon those CRAs. And so that drew a lot of attention, a lot of angst, and it was a very hotly debated bill last session. It ultimately did not pass. I think it will get filed again. There's a non-trivial host of candidates for office coming up who have seized upon that issue as part of their platform about reform. So we are going to see those bills again. Whether they'll make it all the way through, probably a 50-50 guess. But I think that even if they did, it probably doesn't have a huge impact on us, particularly with our CRA, which I think is staged to sunset at a certain period anyway, correct? I think the county has a couple CRAs as well, but my understanding is that they don't fit within the envelope of some of this data about poor management, and I think the bill, if a bill on CRA were to pass, it would be somewhat moderate, holding harmless those CRAs that are in existence and that are operating under a certain set of metrics that are verifiable. Was there anything else on the CRA issue, Mayor?
No, just, it did hit our paper, some of the news through what we had as the USA Today portion. I
The
sent that
article
to you.
about Richard Corcoran,
Yeah.
yes. Speaker of the House.
As usual, when a topic gets brought up, our paralegal is right on it. She has, Mikhail has sent out to all of us, including you, Jerry, the Charlotte County's draft legislative agenda items. So, they're requesting, $2 million for the El Jobim septic to sewer conversion, $1.5 million for Toledo Blade Boulevard, $500,000 for a sustainable brewing program for Western Michigan,
Wow.
$1,250,000 for Piper Road infrastructure. Sunrise Park to be determined, $500,000 for our, they call it the South County Library and Archive, it's the Punta Gorda Library. The Minnesota Key 10-year beach management plan to be determined, $1,500,000 for airport rescue and firefighting training, and $750,000 for a community action team. Policy issues, constitutional revision, regional planning councils, certified engineering inspections, MSBU assessment methodology, tourism development tax. I have quite a list here. So we can look at it. Home rule and vacation rentals.
Okay, I do have that
Oh.
list, and yes, how about if we
Seems doable.
spend some time offline going through that? And I did want to mention the Constitutional Revision Commission. We
Yeah,
talked
when
about
do
that.
we need to really pay attention to what's being proposed?
Well, let me tell you a little bit about what's happened there. The CRC is a constitutionally mandated panel in Florida, unique to Florida. It's the only state that has it. Provision in our Constitution that says every 20 years we'll impanel a group of citizens who will get together and consider and then potentially propose ballot initiatives that will go on the next general election ballot for consideration to amend the Constitution. It's the one mechanism for amending the Constitution that does not pass through the Supreme Court review phase. Some people would say that's a good thing, some people would say that's a bad thing. But in any event, the CRC has the authority to put an initiative directly on the ballot. They don't have the authority to change the Constitution, but they have the ability, the autonomous authority to put it directly on the ballot for the voters. The voters still have to approve it by the same margin, the 60% margin, as any other ballot initiative. So that process began this last May, actually in April, and then into May. 37 members were appointed. They're appointed by the governor, Speaker of the House, President of the Senate. That's how the Constitution lays it out. They had a series of meetings around the state, public hearings, to take input from the public. And then any member on the commission itself can actually file a proposal, kind of like a legislator sponsoring a bill. They've done that for the last few months, and then they have now just recently appointed committees. And so there's 8 or so substantive committees and 2 or 3 procedural committees, and they are starting to meet in this similar fashion as the legislature. The only committee that's met so far is the Rules Committee, but the others are about to, starting in September. We'll have, on each of the weeks when the legislature is not having a committee week, the Constitutional Revision Commission will be having a committee week. So I'll keep you advised of that. If there's specific issues that you want to put forward as an amendment to our Constitution, I'd be glad to bring them forward to them. As a general rule, from the past, starting in '88, when the CRC met for the first time, typically throughout the whole year process, the CRC will end up putting on the ballot a handful of initiatives. It's not like the legislature where they'll pass several hundred bills. This will be a small number of proposed constitutional amendments, and with this particular CRC makeup, many of the members have kind of indicated that they're not especially forward-leaning about wanting to make a ton of changes to the Constitution. So I'm not expecting a huge ultimate agenda by them, but we'll see. Certainly the public interest, the public input has been vast, and the proposals have run the entire gamut of policy that you could imagine through the legislative process. Some of the proposals are germane to a constitution. Some of them are not, but there's been hundreds, maybe thousands of proposals. And so we'll see over between now and January, the committees will continue to meet. Then the main CRC, the overall CRC, will meet more aggressively, and they have to wrap their work up by, I believe it's May 18th. And so that it's with at least 180 days prior to the election. So between now and May 18th, if you have proposals that as a council you would like to submit to the CRC for a potential constitutional amendment, please let me know what those are. There have been a fair number of local government councilmen and mayors and county commissioners and commission chairs who have come to some of these meetings and spoken about the home rule issue. Probably not as much attention as some of the other social issues that tend to draw a lot of public input, but some discussion about preemption and home rule. So it'll be interesting to see if they put one of those measures on the ballot.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Would you think that the CRC might be more receptive to the home rule issue as a constitutional amendment than possibly the legislature? Even though their ultimate decision doesn't come out until May, if they see that there's a lot of, if the legislature sees that there's a lot of traction on the CRC, it might have influence on the legislature.
Well, Counselor, you really asked me a political question there, but I would say not necessarily. I mean, the CRC is appointed by members of the legislature. Are there members of the legislature who would be supportive of more home rule? Yeah, sure. I know when I was in the legislature, I was a strong proponent of home rule. But as a general rule, I don't know that that's a really hot button issue, at least from what I've seen among the CRC members. Now, maybe it'll pick up steam, but there are members of the legislature who are on the CRC. So they would be reforming themselves. But it's possible, but I haven't seen it yet. If the league, if all of the cities and counties wanted to really make that a priority, make that their number one issue before the CRC, and wage it that way, then perhaps. But inherently or intrinsically, I haven't seen a big groundswell from among CRC members on that issue. Now, To counter what I said, there are a fair number of members on the CRC who come from local government. There's city councilmen, there's county commissioners, supervisor of elections. So any one of them could file a bill, sponsor a proposal. They'd have to get a majority vote from the commission. I think 22 actually to carry an issue onto the ballot. We'll probably know that within the next 60 days, I'd say, whether one of those members on the CRC is willing to make that their issue.
Is there a way if the city council and we got the interest of other city councils to increase the heat on that issue? Because there's only, as you said, 30 some odd people that we would need to convince on the CRC to make that a priority versus how many hundreds there are in the legislature.
Sure. Like I said, the CRC is going around the state and holding these public hearings and sending a representative to one of those public hearings, an elected official, to stand at the podium and say, hey, this is a priority for our community. That is the way that it gains attention. I'm simply saying that as I've seen there have been 11 of those, and I can go to all of them. I'm simply saying that more people show up on other issues than on that issue. So the short answer to your question is yes. You can definitely elevate the profile of that by having people show up and speak. I've seen some local governments doing that. I saw it in the CRC meeting that was in Hillsborough County. It was on the campus of USF. And there were 3 or 4 members of city councils and county commissioners who showed up and stated that position. Of course, there were 300 or 400 who stood up and spoke about things from abortion to gun control. But there were some. I saw it in Duval County. Several local elected officials showed up. When a mayor goes to the podium and says, I'm the mayor of a city, I think the CRC members recognize that person is a representative, is speaking for an entire community on that topic. And so I think it does have an impact. I think it's worth doing. I think it's something that Scott Dudley at the League has been talking about. They've been going to the CRC meetings. They haven't been speaking at every one of them, but they've been going to them.
Thank you.
Sounds good, yeah. Side note, FERDAP, none of it was funded last year. Is there any chance that we could support that coming back? Because one of the hot topics on my committee was Florida Forever, Florida Community Land Trust. They seem to think that the funding will come in this year. I don't know if we have to resubmit or what we have to do. I know we were on the ranked list, but supporting in the library grant obviously didn't get funded last year either. How can we support promoting those back into the budget?
One, make sure I have a copy of that prior filing. Let me go through that again. And, FERDAP's broken into a lot of buckets, a lot of pots, a lot of line items. And,
But it was 0 last year, right?
yeah, well, pretty much, yes. I mean, those funds, I think a lot of that funding I think the appropriations for those funding items faced a tortuous path in part because of the funds that were being negotiated on the Lake Okeechobee and all of the waterway and the springs issues. It seems to me like everything was being held back in anticipation of a deal at the last minute, which did come and was $1.5 billion from the state alone. So I think it was kind of victim of that. But I do think that there's been enough discussion about that, enough pushback that there is going to be some FERDAP funding. Probably not at 15 or 16 levels, but by pocket or by category, some of them may approach that. And if my team has a better sense for which ones could be used for the application that we had made, then we can put our resources into pushing for that pocket rather than fight the entire FERDAP battle.
Sounds good. Yeah, any other questions or comments?
I will follow up with Mr. Koenig
Yes.
between now and the delegation hearing, and we'll determine our presentation, which has to be submitted in advance in writing, and then we'll talk a little bit about whether the mayor or Howard or others will join with me. That's not a council meeting day, though, right?
19th, I don't,
Council meeting's the 20th.
20.
okay,
So no scheduled
yeah, it's
conflict
good.
official.
Legislative is in October.
October 19th.
It's a Thursday, yep,
Okay.
yeah.
Excellent. Well, it is a pleasure to represent the city of Punta Gorda and Tallahassee. It's our favorite client. I always say that because it's true. And
And to all your clients.
well, I will say all of our Charlotte County local government clients. Sure, I mean that's our home. It's what we know. We're recognized in Tallahassee as being from here. So yeah, it's a fun one, and we appreciate the opportunity to continue to serve you.
And I will be coming up as part of the Florida League of Cities. I'm on the board of directors now for the 11th district, so we'll be making a couple trips to Tallahassee.
Excellent. Make sure I have a date so I can
I
wear a
will.
clean shirt.
I will. I will.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Now we are headed into the Pickleplex of Punta Gorda, and we've heard they have a little presentation.
They do.
Okay.
Is that Fabian here?
Should I set up?
Brewing program for Western Michigan.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. My name is Ted Kagris, and I'm president of Pickleplex of Punta Gorda. We are a group of people, or pickleball enthusiasts, I should say, that have formed a corporation, and we're looking to build a state-of-the-art pickleball complex on the campus of FSW. So, once we get our presentation up here, we'll begin.
While we're waiting, we've come a long way since you asked me to be the
Yes.
pickleball
and you-
liaison.
Yes, yes.
So,
Thank you, Nancy.
you're welcome.
Very serious.
It's turned positive, very positive.
It's been a lot of work in a short 9 months.
Okay.
Well, since we're only at 50%, we still have 50% to go. We actually started our fundraising campaign about 2.5 weeks ago, and that's led by Sue Carmen, who's actually in Arizona today, doing some more work for us out there. But in 2.5 weeks, we've actually raised $200,000. So, we're currently selling naming rights to courts. We're selling naming rights on the back of bleachers. Anything that we can put a name on it, we're selling it. We are a corporation. We've applied for our 501c3. So, as a marketing tool, it'll be a write-off for businesses. But personally, if you want to give to Pickleplex, it'll also be a write-off when we get our 501c3 approved. You're getting close, 96%.
Ta-da.
Ta-da, there we
Hey.
go. From the beginning. Okay, that's good right there. Okay, super, thank you. Down there. Okay, so welcome to Pickleplex. Again, Pickleplex is a state-of-the-art pickleball complex, and it's going to be built on the campus of FSW. Okay, that's not working. Oh, there we go. This surprised me as much as it will probably you, but pickleball actually started in 1965. Currently, in the United States, there are 2.5 million players, 22 countries, all skills and ages, obviously. And we also have people that play down at Gilchrist in wheelchairs, so we are ADA, we want to have courts for ADA at our new facilities. And obviously, we promote sportsmanship. Pickleball in Charlotte County, currently there is 53 tennis locations in Charlotte County and only one dedicated pickleball location. In 2009, we actually had 20 players in Charlotte County, and today we have 2,500 plus players playing at one dedicated location. Okay, back in November last year, we held our first hospice tournament for Tidewell Hospice, and we actually raised almost $9,000, and that was donated to them. Peace River Picklers, we had our second annual tournament this year. We had 353 participants, and you can see the breakdown for where those came out of. In Florida, we had 125. Out of the state, we had 149. So we had good participation out of the state. We had 209 room nights, and you can see the transportation numbers and where everybody came from. Now, the U.S. Open, which is just south of us down in Naples, in 2016, they had 800 participants, which gave us 1,500 room nights and had an economic impact of $2.5 million. This year, 2017, we had 1,280 participants, 5,000 room nights, and both last year and this year were televised on CBS Sports, and they had a $35,000 purse prize with a $6.5 million economic impact for 1 week. So today's situation in Charlotte County, we have 2 indoor multi-use pickleball locations. Oops, I did that wrong. Let's go back. Okay. Outdoor, we only have one, dedicated pickleball location. We actually have to use South County, and we actually have to rent those courts where we actually hold leagues and drills. And in season, we fill those courts up every day. So the growth of pickleball is outweighing, the facility that we have to use. So Gilchrist under construction this fall is only going to make the matter that much worse. It's imperative that, we get this project going because, we have to have a place for these people to play. We're going to have all these snowbirds down here. They're going to play pickleball, and already now during season, the wait times to get on court is at a half an hour because we got so many people down here. So the current courts we have are not sanctioned courts. Being sanctioned courts, it'll give us leverage to bring more of the larger tournaments here in town. So with all that being said, we formed a team. We have 6 people, including Nancy Prafke, who is our pickleball liaison, and we're called the Pickleball Founders Team. So we created this team to create a solution to build a new pickleball complex and to move most of the pickleball playing from its current location. So this is our mission statement. Pickleplex of Punta Gorda will provide a positive environment for the residents of Charlotte County and surrounding communities for the health and well-being of the public. The complex will provide outdoor and indoor facilities focusing on exercise, competitive sports, including but not limited to pickleball. Emphasis will be placed on educating the youth and the underprivileged on the merits of sports activities and fitness. The state-of-the-art facility will attract participants from out of the state and all over the world. So here's a map. You can see we're over by the airport on the campus of FSW, who are, they're in partnership with us and giving us approximately 10 acres of land to build this facility on. So phase 1 will include 16 lighted courts, which will be sanctioned, covered seating, so we don't even have to bring chairs. We can sit on the bleachers and stay out of the sun. We'll have a concession stand with a bathroom also located on there, or bathrooms, at an estimated cost of $550,000, and a completion date of December 2017. And I can't say this strong enough, it looks like more than likely the construction around the Gilchrist courts won't start till after the first of the year, but it's imperative that we get these first 16 courts built on the campus of FSW before, you know, that construction starts. I can't say that strong enough because we can't afford to have our pickleball people here go find other places in Cape Coral or down in Fort Myer. Right now, it's amazing. We get people from Sarasota, we get people from Fort Myer, Cape Coral that come to Punta Gorda because the competition is here, and it's just a beautiful place to play. I mean, every Tuesday and Thursday